Yes, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of Full Course Yellow. It's the regular get together, the Wednesday night get together from in pit lane, and of course the big subject of the weekend is the Bathurst 1000. So we've got. We've got four in the box at the moment. Stuart will join us in a moment. He's doing some technical stuff. Dave still will unfortunately a non-starter for this evening, but as we can see, Peter Johnson is with us as well. Mark Jones is with us. Richard Outram, and as I said, Stuart Fairweather will be joining us a little bit later as well once he gets all of his technical gear back in action again. So we'll just mute the mics there. And hello to everybody. And well, let's firstly have a spin around and find out what people thought of Bathurst before we get into the weighty stuff of parody and other nonsense. The good stuff. I mean, Pete, did you enjoy Bathurst on the weekend?
Yeah, I did, and particularly the last couple of hours, it was more a traditional endurance race because people were nursing their cars. It was like a Bathurst of old, where you were nursing your cars to get across the line.
Yeah, it's interesting that I mean, everyone was sort of complaining, but I suppose that's one of the things in endurance races. I mean, you hear all sorts of things, and I'm not sure how sort of legit and or genuinely concerning some of those steering issues were for the for Van Gisbergen and also for Erebus as well. But either way, I mean, it was the biggest winning margin for more than 20 years. But then we didn't have that sort of late race safety car. And things might have got very, very interesting if we'd have had the late race safety car. But we didn't. In fact, we had relatively few.
We had fewer.
Safety cars this year. I mean, obviously the weather was good, but I think a lot of people were expecting, with the lack of downforce, that we'd have more. We'd have more chaos and more safety cars, but everybody was in the main. Everybody was very well behaved.
Everyone was behaved across every single category. Fine weather, not too much wind, and everyone was out for a Sunday afternoon drive.
Yeah, it certainly was. I mean, it was. We'll talk about the support races as well a little bit. With a couple of things we sort of mentioned last week. Wonder what sort of speeds the top sports sedans all set. Well, we know now. They at least one of them went very fast indeed, and we also said that Angus Fogg in that New Zealand Mustang would be very fast in a straight line, and that was proven true too, because he absolutely blinded everybody with his top speed. In fact, he's now got the record alongside of our mate Brad Sheriff from Tasmania, who had that terrifyingly fast Nissan that we saw at the Bathurst 12 hour. Earlier in the year in the support races there in the combined sedans. So there was a shot of the two of them together, sort of saying, "Hey, we're the two fastest cars down Conrod Straight." And there, but it was interesting that Roland Dane was in one of his comments about. One of his complaints was that he felt, and I would agree, that the tyres were just too soft, and it was interesting that he felt that the decision to run the soft tyre was because they wanted to make sure that the supercars were not being upstaged in terms of lap times by the Super 2 cars, because they've lost so much downforce. And as it turned out, the Super 2 cars are the top Super 2 cars. I think Kai Allen, in his Mustang from last year, I think he was about second or third in the lap times as well, ahead of all of the supercars. And we also had, of course, Tony Ricciardello, and we had the Carrera Cup cars were pretty quick. So Aaron Noonan on V8 Sleuth had a combined top 20, like a combined starting grid from all the qualifying things. I think the first of the supercars was in about fourth place or something, but
16th actually, because
I did
that same chart on Thursday of race week. I suppose it's different for Friday because no, that's probably right. hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, well, they went because they obviously went a lot faster because they were running on Thursday and Friday, and in the early parts of Friday they were running sort of in the sevens and eights, the
Yeah.
supercars, and then of course it just got faster and faster as the weekend went on. As of course did the sports stands. I mean, Jordan Caruso said he's 2:02, I think, on Friday. I think that was their qualifying session, late
Yes,
Friday.
that is correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so he said that, and then in the race, he set a new lap record for the class in the race of just over 2:03. So, and he was running. Unfortunately, he had some engine problems. They changed the engine over, and it wasn't as powerful as the engine that they set the qualifying time with. So he was confident. Jordan was very confident of going under the 2:02 in the race. He felt that once the track got rubbered up and he was a bit more confident, and we got into the race, he was confident of dipping into the ones or even into the sort of the 2 minute flat area. So yeah. So anyway, Mark? What do you think of the race?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, it's Bathurst, and I've been addicted to the place since I was 5 years old. 5? Yeah, because my earliest memories of life are actually Bathurst '77. So yeah, and I just loved it. I always loved Bathurst. But yeah, I suppose the lack of downforce and some question marks on mechanical reliability might have caused the Bathurst 1000 field to run more conservatively, and that's why we got very little in the way of incidents. That the teams were taking a little bit more care than they had done in the last few years. Like this year was not a 1,000 kilometer sprint that Scaife and Crompton have been telling us the race has been
As
for.
Pete was saying, it did feel in the later parts of the race, it did feel a lot more like a traditional endurance.
There was only one
Race.
significant incident during the race itself, and that was James Moffat doing the pinball act through the dipper. And there wasn't a lot of other incidents.
No, there was nothing. There was none. That was, as you say, that was about the biggest incident. I mean, there was nothing really big in any of the categories. So, as Richard said, everybody was there. Mad Cow Mark, he's gone already. Live drag racing. Well, something will be running. I'm not sure what's running tonight. I'm assuming it's something on from the United States. But yes, we'll find out that from. And I forgot the name of the YouTube channel now, but they run a lot of stuff during. There's a whole bunch of little events that they tend to stream over the week, including a lot of midweek stuff. So he's obviously watching that. Box is joining us again. G'day, Box. How are you? Paul Van Den Acker is also joining us as well. So as Paul is saying, Crompo forgot to sell the tickets for the last 20 laps because that was.
But I thought that was refreshing that they didn't go and I thought that was refreshing that they kept it at the same level as what they've done, because it was obvious that it was not a close finish. So I thought that was refreshing.
Yeah, I think they tried to beat it up a little bit, and I mean it's still annoying. I mean, it was funny. I mean, with all of the chaos going on in the lead up to the event, if you listened to the commentary, you wouldn't have known there were any problems with the dreaded parody at all. You wouldn't have known of any of Ford's pronouncements, and it's very interesting what came out of Ford. I mean, the statement that they made on the when they were knocked back, as we were expecting that they'd get knocked back, but the statement they made was very terse and rather interesting. What was a lot more interesting, and there's been two things, and I referred to it on the Facebook page, was the article in Talk Cafe, which is the sort of the general motoring section of Speed Cafe, and Stephen Otley's report about the future of Ford in supercars. And as I said online, Steve Otley, if you don't know Steve, worked at Auto Action for many, many years, is a very experienced motorsport journalist and also now general motoring journalist. And as I said, his contact book, the people that he would be able to talk to in terms of the insiders would be as good as anybody in the local industry. And when he makes a statement and a quote which says that, having spoken to senior Ford executives, he believed that the chances of Ford continuing were at the moment only about 50%. I believe him. It's not, as I said, anywhere else I'd sort of go, that's clickbait. But no, he's not. Steve's not the sort of person. Not the sort of person who's prone to that sort of thing. If that's what he says, that somebody high up has fed him that line that it's a 50-50 proposition at the moment. So, but now they're going to get they're finally going to get their parity review, because they have now, following their performance at Bathurst, they've now officially reached the parity trigger, and the parity review is going to happen. And you would assume that if all goes according to plan, they will probably have those aerodynamic adjustments in place for the Gold Coast, where it won't matter anywhere near as much as it would have at Bathurst.
Yeah. Yeah, or even as much as it would have on the old layout at the Gold Coast. But yeah, on this shortened layout that we have had to, I don't want to say put up with it, because it's my local event these days.
So they've taken it because there's a tram running through the middle of it now or something.
Well,
now, isn't there?
And and it seems
I
that
haven't been
trams
up
have had
there.
a interesting history in motorsport in recent times after a famous incident in Singapore.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's. I haven't been up to the Gold Coast basically since the days of. I think I did one supercar event in the first year, but the rest of the time I did. I went up to Indy almost every year. I mean, Richard, you came up with us one year. You were up there with us one year.
2 years, I thought.
2 years might have been 2 years.
Yeah. A lot of fun. Love the old track, longer track.
Was a lot of fun. Jeremy is with us again. Jeremy probably still. Sorry I'm late, Dad. Yeah, Jeremy's probably still celebrating the all Kiwi victory at Mount Panorama, the first one for since Steve Richards and
99.
Greg Murphy, 1999. So that was.
Just going to ask then, assuming this is working.
Yes, it is.
Who had the paternity test to make sure of which one was Dad?
Well, let's. We won't go.
Yes. Yeah. There are such things
so I'm assuming this is working.
I was only in New Zealand for one weekend, and I wasn't that drunk. But,
so I'm assuming all of this is working, and you can actually see me and hear me with reasonable lip sync now, right?
Not a problem.
The lip sync is a little loud, but certainly not what it was before. I mean, it's pretty close.
Yeah, I went to a hardware output and basically gave NDI the flick.
Okay,
you can be Milli Vanilli now.
And now I should point out, with the race that was on the weekend, yes, I put it on. I remember growing up watching it when it was in black and white TV.
For an hour on World of Sport.
It was boring. I literally had the TV on in the background, trying to watch it, trying to concentrate on it, and it was boring. The cars were all the same. The racing was boring. There was more action in the first 5 minutes of a Formula One race, and that's not normally the case. I'm sorry, Bathurst. Fail.
Yeah, I thought the car. I mean, okay, you've only got the two cars, and they're virtually similar. But I think they look. I really like the look of the Gen 3 cars. I'm not 100% sold on the way they're racing it, but I think cause certainly when you compare them to last year, they look way better, and I thought they looked terrific running around Bathurst. Yes, I'd like to see some more cars out there, and I'd like to see some class cars. I mean, but as someone said, why don't they let the Super 2 cars in? Well, if they did that, the Super 2 cars probably would have won. So,
But well, you say that, but this Super 2 teams don't really want to compete at Bathurst because all of their drivers are co-drivers for the main
Yeah.
teams.
Mhm.
So there's very little Super 2 teams who could race at Bathurst.
And Kai
in the
Allen, who ended up
1000s.
winning the Super 2s after some problems for Zach Best. Kai Allen
Darren
seems to
Love.
be very much in the gun for a future drive. I mean, the fact that he got the wild card with Dick Johnson Racing, and the fact also that he ended up qualifying. He ended up as well. I mean, the sort of Simona got sort of pushed aside, and sort of she suddenly became even though she's far more experienced in a whole range of categories than Kai was. Kai was clearly the fastest, and he ended up sort of like setting the fast time in qualifying for the team, and he seemed to do he did a really good job. So so he's obviously been sort of looked upon for the future, possibly down the track as in a couple of years as a potential replacement for Will Davison, I suppose. But Will's not that old, and he's as fit as a fiddle. So that's the problem now. I mean, where do all these people race? So
Cameron McConville was the Dick Johnson Jr. Heir apparent for a little bit, and he eventually had to make his own way elsewhere. Although I suppose he was only a year or two ahead of Steve Johnson in that regard. So maybe that wasn't the best.
Yeah, that was
analogy.
Probably the case. The Qantas Club took until to change it from Sky News. Yeah. I've had that recently. I had that on Friday at the club, the pub. I was met up with a good mate of mine for a few cold ones for lunchtime, and there was like, it's a sports bar, so there were televisions everywhere, and not a single one was turned on to Bathurst. And I said, could you flick it on to Bathurst? And they went, what's Bathurst? So eventually we got it put on there, but it took a while. So that was on Friday, but they had no idea. They were fairly young in the place, and they sort of had no real idea what was going on, including, that was obviously the case on ABC radio too, because I woke up on Sunday morning and I've got the alarm to set to go off with the smart speaker, sort of giving me the news, and first the general news, then the sporting news, and eventually they got around to Bathurst, where they point out that the Camaros were doing very well in Bathurst. So good on those Camaros. So they obviously didn't know much about it either. But
well, they don't have. There's nobody in ABC Sport. There's nobody in ABC Sport Grandstand these days who knows anything about motorsport. There always used to be one or two there in years gone by, but now they've kind of outsourced their entire motorsport content to Will Hagen, and nobody within the
Will's not doing it anymore as well. Richard Trail is doing most of it. I mean,
good on him.
Richard is sort of taken over the world. He's sort of Mr. Motorsport Australia. He's got a finger in every pie, and so he was.
They need to get Richard on to an episode of Offsiders.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I didn't see I remember this year, for the Grand Prix, they're very opposed because. I forget who was hosting. I think it was Kelly Underwood and they were talking about all the football, all the rest, and it was the Grand Prix, and they said, and I think it was Kelly said towards the end of the show, and of course the big event in Melbourne this week is the Grand Prix. Anybody got any comments? And I think it was one of the journalists said, not really. I thought this was a sporting show. And everyone laughed and thought they were very, very clever, and that was the end of the discussion on the Grand Prix.
Yeah, well, since when a sports report has been really very, very clever?
Well, it's also
I can name one. I can name one.
Yeah, there's got to be one.
He's on the other end of the panel compared to you, mate.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that. But he doesn't make it to Channel 7 and Channel 9, unfortunately.
Face for community TV. Hey, Brett.
Yes, it's all going wonderfully. Well, the thing is, I mean, even when they do put sports there, I remember sort of an interview with Bruce McAvaney on Triple R of all places. One night, and they were asking him about his storied career, and they said asked him about the highlights and yes, all the Olympics and Carl Lewis, it was marvelous. And then they said, what about the downside? He went, I said I had to go up and cover car racing at Bathurst.
They got him anchoring it, and he was bored stiff.
Yeah, he said he hated every second of it.
He doesn't like car racing.
Yeah, he didn't like it, and famously, Gordon, I think I want to say Gordon French or Gordon Brown, I forget which one, but anyway, Gordon, who used to be the head of sport for HSV7 Melbourne, he was very much that when Channel 7 were covering Bathurst, covering Amaroo, and also and occasionally at Calder Park as well. He didn't. He put up a lot of arguments to say, I do not want the Channel Sport logo. I do not want the Channel 7 Sport logo to appear on this because it is not sport. It is. I don't know what it is, but it is not sport. I do not want this to be a part. And thankfully, he got outvoted by ATN7 in Sydney, where of course they were absolutely gung ho on motorsport, and of course I did all of the covered Amaroo and Bathurst and all the AEDST stuff. So
and Racecam, of course, was a tidy earner for them.
Yeah, they did very well. I mean, they didn't invent it, but they certainly perfected it. I mean, it was Thompson in France had the first iteration, but I mean, what really moved that they won, and Channel 7 won an Emmy award for Racecam, and what really moved it was the fact that they put it on the sort of the movable sort of turret to sort of move it around, but also what really set it off and made everybody, particularly in America and Europe, just fall over was the fact that they were talking to people like Dick Johnson and Peter Brock in the car, and Peter Williamson, and they were telling gags. I mean, and I think that's one thing we lose now. I mean, we haven't seen that for years, and I've heard some people say that the current group of drivers don't want to do it, and others have said that the cars are now way too noisy for them to do it comfortably. But they're talking to their crew all the time, and we hear the radio commentary on that. And I'm sure that they could figure that out. I mean, we know that there's enough sort of noise reduction technology.
Oh yeah,
they do it. Say at the end of the top 10 shootout, when a driver's completed their lap, they do it.
Yeah, well,
but I heard
the engine's trundling though, so
I heard it was also. Remember they had that sprint round at Bathurst, and Dick Johnson's wing broke while he was talking to the.
Dick was responsible for a couple of faux pas on air when he was in NASCAR. They were doing a live cross, and let's just say he dropped language that you couldn't use in the US.
he didn't spin or anything, or he did spin, but he didn't say anything profanity-wise. He just had a massive spin, and I heard ever since then, that's when they stopped talking to drivers while they were racing.
Well, Mike Raymond said at the time that was that he became quite alarmed at the incident. So I think that that probably came from the seven guys as much as from the drivers.
Yeah, I think obviously. I mean, but there are ways and means. I mean, we all know about the 7-second delay. I mean, and it's. And I heard a few people put on Facebook, this is I'm listening to the radio commentary, and this thing on the television isn't live. The fact is that There is no such thing as live sport on television anymore, because it's digital. By the time by the time everything's encoded and then de-encoded at your end, like it's encoded at their end and then de-encoded at our end. It's usually between 7 to 10 seconds at least.
It can
out
be
of whack
longer.
Anyway, can be. Oh, can
Yeah,
be.
It can be longer.
Much longer.
But they did change the rules a while ago so that it would never be as long as it was when people were betting at the TAB
Yes.
when the race had already finished.
Yes, that did happen, and that was something that I thought of, because they did that many years ago. This is way before digital technology, but in the early days of because the old man used to be. That's how I sort of knew how Bob knew my old man. My old man used to be a heavy for an SB bookie, an illegal SB bookie in Ascot Vale called Charlie Smith, and what everybody was talking about back then, when the early days of tape recording, someone realised that, because they used to take the bets in the pubs, and someone realised if we don't take the radio, the coverage live in the pub, but we put it through a tape loop, delay it by about a minute, and then play the tape loop out into the pub, then we'll know who won, and we can get on with the SP bookie, because that's the SP starting price bookie. So they go to the second, and they go there and say, give us £20 on number 7, and it was like and then, they go, and suddenly number 7 and the race. It didn't take them long to figure out what was going on, but they figured it out eventually. And as the old man said, the people who were responsible probably regretted the fact that they ever thought of that idea, no matter how much money they made out of it. Yep. So it looks like we've lost Pete, unfortunately, at the moment. So he's dropped out. But anyway, let's see. Jeremy's saying that 90% of his money was on Matt paying 10 to 1. Yeah, I didn't look at the. I tend not to bet on. I don't tend to bet anyway. But I certainly don't bet on car racing. It's just there's too many things. Yeah, too many things to go wrong. It's not as form is very fleeting, and in an endurance race, I'm not going to invest what little money I've got. I'm not going to pop. I'm going to pop that. I was. I had a look at. I had a look at an outside bet of Chaz Mostert, because I predicted that on the thing. I thought they might be a chance. They're up his back. I didn't end up not even looking at the odds. So not there. Okay, so let's we'll briefly talk about the parity situation. The interesting thing is, I mentioned the story out of Steve Otley's story in Talk Cafe. The follow-up to that was on Speed Cafe's podcast on the Monday, which is the one that's done by Mark Fogarty, and just straight after Sandown, he spoke with the head of Ford Australia, who said, no, we are committed to Supercars through to the end of 2024, where we're very much a part of this, and we're heading into next year full of confidence and all the rest. After or during Bathurst, he basically said, look, nothing is for sure. We'll just we probably, he was asked to make the commitment again, and he sort of more or less said, we'll see. So it's interesting. There's obviously sort of some dissension there within Ford, and it sounds like it's coming very heavily from the American side of the operation, because as Steve said in his article, he said that they've got a lot on their plate at the moment. Ford Performance has got a lot on their plate at the moment with the GT3 and the GT4 Mustang. They've got the move into Formula One, and as they said, that basically, they're saying, look, we don't need this crap, and it's on the global scene, on the it's not that important. We'd like to be in supercars, But if we can't win, if we're going to be, and it was interesting that one of the quotes came out says that like the fact that we're just not the fact that we're not winning is one thing. The fact that we're just not competitive reflects very badly on the brand, and especially with the fact that the car that's beating them is a car that's about to go out of production and basically isn't really available in Australia anyway. So it's like, well, and the Mustang's selling really well because there is no real other option. If you want that sort of, if you want an old-fashioned V8 sort of muscle car, that's about all you've got now.
No, there is another choice.
Mercedes.
There is another choice. Kia Stinger.
Maybe an AMG.
Well, the Kia Stinger is going out of production as well, and they're not bringing that back as well. And that's the things are changing everywhere. I got a press release this afternoon out of Jaguar where they've just said, basically they've released a new sports car and they've said this is the final petrol powered Jaguar. There's a limited edition run. I think there's something like 27 or something coming to Australia. And powered by, I think it's a 5.3 litre turbocharged V8. But they've said this is it. I mean, we're not producing internal combustion engine cars after this. This is our goodbye to that. Alfa Romeo are saying the same thing. They're saying they're not going to produce internal combustion engine cars anymore. A lot of people are leaving. Of course, the good news is, if you're a fan of internal combustion engined cars, and particularly big internal combustion engined cars, you've got a V12 from Aston Martin that's going to race at Le Mans, and they've already said no, there will not be any hybrid power. It's going to be a pure old-fashioned all ICE internal combustion engine. It's going to be the V12 produced by Cosworth. Is going to make lots and lots of lovely sounds. May not be competitive because I'm sure that the ACO and IMSA and the FIA will, as I think it was Nick Damon on Midweek Motorsport was saying, you can't see the FIA being absolutely delighted if sort of a non-hybrid car turns up to Bathurst and turns up to Le Mans and basically spanks everybody, all the high-tech super duper hypercars, and this basically what's an old-fashioned big engined V12 thing runs away and hides.
Kind of to defeat the point of around 25 years of Le Mans racing, going back to the original Audi hybrids.
Yeah, well, they were, they were interesting. Interesting that once again from Midweek Motorsport, and they've come out and denied it now. But John Hindhaugh is still and he's got a lot of contacts within Audi from all the years in sports car racing, and also Nick Damon's got good connections as well. He was, they're both very adamant that Audi will not go into Formula One. He's saying that no, they're not going to. They've had a rethink and they're probably not going into Formula One now, and that they might even be thinking of the fact that perhaps leaving prototypes. Perhaps we picked the wrong time to leave prototypes with all of these new manufacturers coming in all of a sudden.
Well, for Volkswagen Group, if they go into Formula One, it's normally Porsche that do it, not any of the other brands.
Oh,
yeah. Well, yeah.
Porsche's kind of only done it once or twice, and
they've done it a few. They've done it a few
that's more
times
than Audi
over.
has.
Yeah, they've done it a few times over the years. Well, Audi, of course. I mean, originally Auto Union, so that going back.
That's not Formula One. That's Grand Prix racing, but it's not Formula One.
Yeah,
Formula One's only existed since the 60s.
But anyway, sort of SB saying with Cadillac coming to Australia might be the next target for supercars. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. That is a potential, but do they have anything in terms of that sporty style? I mean, certainly in the old, if we still had Falcons, we had like 4-door sedans and all the rest of it. The Cadillac would be a pretty good mix for supercars. But
they could always run an all-wheel drive Escalade.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be driving all-wheel drive anything, but
The last time they did that, it ended in tears.
yeah, literally, yes, literally in tears. We saw a bit of that
all the pack of
on the
arseholes.
weekend. Yeah, sort of, Jim's moment, which he sort of regrets, I think, or he doesn't regret saying it, but he just, it just keeps coming. Every Bathurst that comes back to haunt him, it's like, oh God, here it is again.
It's like
Gentlemen, Jim,
shingles
you're all a
keeps
pack
coming
of
back.
arseholes.
Well, it's certainly got a run
Yeah.
this year. Yeah.
One of the great
I'll come up
Australian
again.
quotes, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's up there with John Hewson catching an egg that was thrown at him at a political rally. I mean, it's very Aussie.
Yeah, Jeremy's saying it could be GT3 without splitters or, well, I don't know about without splitters or wings. I'd just run this. I think GT3. I didn't like the fact that the DTM went to GT3, but if you have a look at the fields that they're getting now and some of the racing, it's been fantastic. But they're not getting the crowds. The interesting thing was, once again, and this has happened once before. The Super GT people, the GT Association in Japan, and also the people behind DTM now have apparently been meeting again to talk about what the future of both of those series is going to be like, whether they're both going to adopt GT3 regulations or whether they might come back with something unique again. And yet again, they did invite Supercars to be a part of that conversation. And once again, Supercars said no. And that's not the first time that happened, because when I was in Malaysia for Super GT years ago, I spoke to there was a press conference there with the GTA Association. I asked them there, had they spoken, because when they were talking about bringing the Class 2, bringing the categories together, DTM and Super GT, I did ask had they factored in Supercars at all and talked to them, and the head of the GTA Association said we tried to open up we tried to establish communication with Supercars from both ourselves and from DTM, and they just weren't remotely interested. So he said that they felt that made sense. They said if they had DTM, Super GT, and Supercars all running to basically similar regulations, there might be a lot more interest from more manufacturers, but that obviously didn't come to pass.
Well, it kind of failed as an experiment anyway. Like there was only 1 or 2 seasons where it actually worked, and none of the Japanese teams went to Germany, and none of the European manufacturers raced in Japan. So
and that was the problem. A lot of that problem was because of tyres, because of course they were running in the DTM, they were running the control tyre and were very happy running the control tyre, whereas there was a full-on tyre war happening in Super GT, and the Japanese were basically saying, no, well, we're not going to run a control tyre because we get a lot of money from Bridgestone and Dunlop and all of the different people in Michelin, all the different people who were running tyres in the Super GT. They had no interest in running control. So when they had that sort of race of two worlds, the DTM cars were at a hell of a disadvantage to the Super GT cars, and it was a bit like sort of like people have said about running supercars overseas. The people like Audi and a few others said, well, Japan isn't really our market, and the Japanese manufacturers said, I think it was Honda or something, basically said, well, we're not really into Europe that much, and we're certainly not into the. And so there was just no point. It was a shame because it would have been great, because they are still spectacular cars. The Super GT cars are amazing to watch. They are blindingly fast. They're as quick as LMP2 cars at Le Mans. Watching them at the Sepang going around the back of the circuit was taking the corners flat was incredible to watch. They were just amazing. Yeah, Jeremy saying Supercars is the AFL of world motorsport, except that the Kiwis win. So, yeah. So anyway, so that was there. So anybody want to say anything else about Bathurst? Do we want to talk about anything else?
Oh, well, the Toyota 86s were brilliant. And yay to Ryan Casher, young Queenslander, getting up and winning the what's effectively now, this is basically the last meeting for the original spec 86 cars. So
people are going to dip into their pockets for that new one.
Well, yeah, I mean, the 86s aren't cheap to begin with. You know, they're cheaper.
There's
but
certainly
not
no
cheap.
shortage of them. I mean,
Well,
the
they've
fields
been
are
tremendously.
Fields have been. Well, you can get them cheap. We had I forget who it was now. One of the very few. Once again, Toyota 86, like a lot of categories now, there's a lot of sort of regionalism in it. I mean, there's a lot of New South Wales and Queensland competitors. There's not that many from Victoria, but we had one young guy a couple of years ago before we went in the early stages, and they got they built their car up from an insurance write-off thing, and he bought it for about $7,500 or something. Built it up for about 20, and went racing. It was quite competitive. It was quite competitive with it. So if you're lucky, you can get hold of them a little cheaper. But the new ones you're not going to get cheaper, and they've got all of the Go Fast. They're the GR version, so they've got all the new Go Faster bits on it. So, but it's been a very, very successful category, and the racing was really, really good.
They're great cars too, and they're if Toyota was ever asked to make a Mazda MX-5, that's the car that they would have built. It's just that little bit more conservative, but not an out and out sports car. But
no, it's not. It's too ugly. Toyota, when Toyota design a sports car, they design something beautiful. They do not design that. What we call in the 86. It's a Subaru BRZ. It's a Subaru design. It's not a Toyota design.
But I'm wondering what's going to happen with all the hand-me-down cars.
Well, they've got a scholarship series which has run and has also had huge fields. I mean, we saw the big field for this round in the top series, but they've had a scholarship series which they've run in some of the speed series events, and they've had sort of 25, 30 cars or more. For the scholarship series, so those cars will go, and they will be a lot cheaper, and they'll move down. So you would assume that they'll run the scholarship series at rounds of the speed series, which could look really, really different next year. It's looking increasingly like that ARG are sort of moving back away from the speed series a bit. It hasn't been announced officially yet, but it will be, that the SRO, Stefan Rattel's organisation, will take over the administration of GT3 racing in Australia, and they will also. The interesting thing is they're also saying that they will have a GT4 championship, but there's talk that the current GT4 championship, the Mechachrome series or whatever, there's talk that they will continue to work with the production car guys, and that the production cars and that GT4 series will end up going with AASA and run on AASA meetings along with for the high tech oils series, which is on this weekend at Sydney Motorsport Park, including some night races, which will be televised on SBS. You can, I think it's on Vice TV on SBS on the weekend, and there's I think we had down there, I think it's something like 26 Trans Am or TA2 cars have entered for that event. So they've got some good fields for that, and they'll look fantastic under lights, I would say.
I presume.
Mark.
You go.
Go, Mark.
I was just going to.
We're at the opposite end of the country and we're doing the same thing. I got Sydney Motorsport Park. Has anyone seen some of the videos that's floating around about the speedway stuff?
Yes.
This is what
Yes,
happens
we
when
we
governments
talked,
get into
yeah,
motorsport.
we talked about that a couple of, as I said then, if you look at the quote from the then Minister of Sport, when they were the proposal, you knew that
Yeah.
this was going to happen from the start, because he basically just said, just run a grader around in an oval and put up a few grandstands and she'll be right. And that's basically what they did, and now look what's happened. So very,
It's
very
making Calder
unfortunate
Park look well organised. It's making the Thunderdome look well organised.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Thunderdome was for
Run
years.
events
I
at a
mean,
profit.
Yeah, I mean, it was.
For a while.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the Thunderdome, the big problem with the Thunderdome was that people didn't. It didn't go. It didn't go sort of national. I mean, the plan. The plan
That's
was
the
that
big problem with the Thunderdome.
Yeah, Calder Park was the first, and then they had some races at Adelaide on the small asphalt speedway at Adelaide International, where we drove around it when we were over there for the drags.
Yeah. No, the problem with Calder Park was that Bob Jane and the France family had a falling out.
Well, they didn't really have a fall, because the problem was Bob never had really had permission to use the NASCAR trademark, because I spoke to someone from NASCAR sort of years afterwards, and he said we didn't know anything. We kept hearing about NASCAR racing in Australia, and he said at no stage did anybody talk to us at any length about being able to use our IP or anything. It was just, Bob just went, okay, it's NASCAR, we've got the support of NASCAR. And NASCAR went, we don't really know too much about that. But they weren't.
Let's circle back around to the other side of the
it.
country. Mark, what point were you going to make when we were talking over the top of each other?
I'm not sure I remember now. I mean, I was going to make mention earlier about that there's a combined Toyota 86 and Mazda MX-5 series here in Queensland, but that wasn't that.
Oh, okay.
That I was,
well, Richard asked,
and
what's
also
gonna happen to all the
BRZs. Sorry,
the 86s will replace all the XLs and all the Kingswoods and all the 944s.
Maybe.
That's usually
As those
what
cars
happens.
age out and you can't get body parts for them or suspension parts and what have you, something more recent will take their place, especially as the price goes down of the chassis.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's
the
happening
old
with the HQs. I mean, you used to have massive fields of HQs. Now the fields are starting to get smaller.
Now no one can afford to buy a HQ to go racing.
Well, they're being offered. They're being offered stupid amounts of money for it. I know somebody who had a racing HQ and was offered silly amounts of money for it, and they said, well, they're not worth that, mate. And he went, convert it back to a road car, it is, and it's and apparently they were going to turn it back into completely stock. They were going to put in take out the cage, put in all the old interior back and all the old trim, and they were going to spend a lot of money on it to basically have a rebuilt, a recreation of a HQ Holden, which was it's funny people are doing that now. I mean, there's a company in England that does sort of remanufactured Mark 1 and Mark 2 escorts, and there was a company I think it was in Perth that wanted to basically do remanufactured HQ Holdens, not for racing purposes but more for the taxi market, because they said that when the Falcon disappeared, they said basically the Commodore was too small. It's a bit like the Hong Kong taxis, which Melissa and I loved. We wanted to import them into Australia. They're fantastic, and they were similar sort of design. They were a straight six, really basic car, but they were big. They were comfortable. You couldn't kill them with a stick, and the taxi industry loved them. So there was a company that was put forward as a possibility that if they could get permission from Holden to get the IP on it, that they were prepared to start to try producing HQ Holdens sometime in the early 2000s.
Wow, that would have been a fairly big market. Excuse me, market that would have made money from. And I was just wondering,
I suppose.
can you imagine they put Mazda rotaries in them, so you could probably do an EV conversion to one.
Oh yeah, easy. You can put anything into. That's the thing. That's the wonderful thing about it. Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, Shannon's Trophy Series, the Australian Rally Championship, and the drags at the Bend all on Sunday. Gee, I'd love to go over to the Bend, and I just haven't had time, and I'd love to go over for the opening of the drag strip, the official, the big opening of the drag strip. But apparently it's almost booked out already. They're asking stupid amounts of money just to camp there, simply because you can't get accommodation. It's going to be a huge crowd turnout for that. But that's that. Yeah, I mean that's the benefit of the Bend. You've got so many opportunities. I mean, Richard, you've been, haven't you?
No, I've not been to the Bend.
Oh, you've not been. Stuart, you had a look at it.
Yeah, I drove when we were coming back from when we were across at Adelaide last time. But from Melbourne to the Bend would really only be an 8 to 10 hour drive.
Oh,
so
not
it
even
is doable.
From your side, not even from your side. Not
yeah,
even
but
that.
I know there are eastern suburbs. I've heard of them. They're too far away.
Yeah,
Yeah,
miles away.
I had to drive that for all the way across to almost past your place to buy that computer, Brett. So yes, I know how long it takes to get there. 2.5 hours to go from one side of Melbourne to the other.
Oh, right, at least. Well, especially that time of night and at the moment. And that's the problem of going out to, like Avalon or anything out that side now. I mean, because of all the road work, because of the big build and, the tunnel and the metro and all sorts of things that they're building at the moment, you're looking at sort of, you're looking at 3 to 4 hours to get out, the other side of Melbourne. So it's absolute chaos. Paul was for the Supercross, and we've got highlights of the story from the Supercross from Adelaide on this week's edition of In Pit Lane tomorrow night. Lots of adverts for the Bend between all the referendum ads. Hopefully there's more facts and somewhat less hysteria for the drag racing than there is about. For the referendum, but
actually, I think you've probably got that backwards when it comes to drag racing, Brett.
Well, I'm not sure about.
Facts are.
Paul's saying 6.5 hours from the west, because he's out your side as well, Stuart. So 6.5 hours to the Bend. Well, that's what we went. I mean, because when we drove over that time.
Yeah, but there's more freeway now than what there is, or what there was there when we hired the Avalon. I mean, that's going back, Brett.
That is going back, and I'd forgot we'd even hired a car into wow.
Yep. Because that was one of the cars you could get out of that. It didn't tire you out or ruin your back to try and sit in the seats of those things. It's kind of like what I'm driving at the moment, and yes, I'm in a minivan with leather seats.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, sort of, I wouldn't I'd drive over and get see if I had to, but I'd probably break it up into two, and most of it, as you say, most of the trip would be getting from one side of Melbourne to the.
But you would break it up into trips between which pub in which town you would stop for a meal break.
That's the way it works. That's it's like where do I stop? Where do I stop for morning tea? Where do I stop for a decent can of lunch? I don't know what pub it was, but when we went over for the American Le Mans series in Adelaide, we stopped off on the way over at a pub. It was either just this side of the border or just the other side. I think it might have been just the other side. It might have been around Border Town or something like that. But we stopped off at a pub and had the best steak I've ever had in my life.
Pub meals are always good.
It was spectacularly good. It was massive and it was beautiful. I remember it to this day. And that was
thinking of
24 years ago.
Thinking of refreshments and sating a parched throat. Does F1 need to have a closer look at things like the water bottles and the cool suits and what have you for the drivers after a rather hot weekend?
Yeah, well, they are now. I mean, they've made a decision that they're going to do that. Pete, you're up on that?
I don't know. I didn't see what the temperature was in Qatar, but English commentators tend to say when it's 23 degrees, oh gee, it's hot. Oh gee, it's hot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
maybe this is why Oscar had such a good performance. The weather was like Melbourne in December.
Oscar said himself, he said that was the toughest conditions I've ever raced a car in. And I
36 degrees centigrade.
And that's at night.
So that was hot, yeah.
And
30.
presumably humid as well.
Yeah, that's what killed it. Although I found, like, in that real humid thing, I mean, well, you'd probably know better, Mark. I mean, because you're up in near the tropics. I find that you're actually a little bit cooler with, because the thing is when you're in the tropics, you sweat a lot. And then the sweat sort of lets you cool down a bit, and I think that's what a lot of people are saying, is that there was they just don't have enough hydration in the car, because they're sort of obviously very limited for space, and also they want to save every sort of every gram possible. That's something that they're going to look at, which the FIA they've made the announcement. They've said they are going to look at the situation and see what needs to be done to put things in place. Certainly, the heat got to young Lance Stroll, or whether that was caused by, was that caused by the heat?
Logan Sargent, I think it was.
Yeah, Logan.
Logan got cooked as well, but
the other North American, not the Canadian.
Yes, but Logan, I mean, ended up like cooked by himself, but he didn't go pushing people over and
right,
on
sorry, yes,
like a pork chop. So I don't know whether that was. He said it was the heat. It could just be that Lance Stroll's a self-entitled prick, but I mean, apart from that,
No way to make a judgment on that.
Son of a billionaire being self-entitled.
Cruel, very cruel.
Surely not. Poor boy.
Speaking of being entitled, was George entitled to a little bit more space in turn one? I mean, it did give Oscar an opportunity to do a Bradbury and just sail through in a second place.
That's been brewing for a while. That's been going.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and
especially with
Lewis,
George keeps making better performances.
And Lewis he's wearing it. He said that was he said, look, 100% my fault. The interesting thing was
after he looked at the video.
Well, the thing was, I mean, he looked at the video and said 100% my fault. The driving standards people looked at it and said, a racing incident. But what they didn't think was a racing incident, and what they've fined him about $50,000 for, was the fact that he just decided to wander across a hot track. So
that was silly.
And we know that's anybody who's put in any time around a racetrack, is whether you're a competitor or an official or a photographer, you do not, under any circumstances, walk over hot tracks.
And interestingly, this time, last time in Japan, when they were doing their shenanigans, Toto was in hospital. This time he had a link at his kitchen table, so he was.
Oh yeah, that was fabulous. That was fabulous.
Yeah.
It's like the hand of God reached down into the cockpits of the McLaren of George Russell's car and grabbed him by the helmet and shook him and said, "Snap out of it."
The technology of the COVID generation. Work from home.
Work from home. Yeah.
Yes.
Why not? I mean, Paul saying the drivers said they had about half a litre water bottle in the car. Well, half a litre is not a lot over.
Not enough.
A couple of hours, but so I don't know. Do they refill? I know, like obviously in the World Endurance Championship, they've got like a pressurized container and they just whip it out and they put in a new one. And it's all it's got all of the electrolytes and all the rest in it. So I don't know whether they do that. As also, I mean, we've said this before. What about the Paul Marshall standing in the sun all day? Yeah, well, I mean, we know that, and they've got I was having a look
where they came from.
If they weren't hydrating them with regular deliveries of drinks and stuff, they'll soon run out of Marshalls.
Well, they're going to run out of Marshalls anyway. Yeah, they're going to run out of Marshalls anyway because I know, like for a few weeks ago when we had the Sandown 500, and there was something down. We had something down at Phillip Island, and there was something up at Winton. Calder Park was being used for something. There was things happening everywhere, and they just couldn't get marshals. And the last thing I went to down at the island, I don't know how they I don't know what the requirements were, but it seemed like, as I was wandering around, because I did a lot of filming. I actually did quite a lot of filming from the marshal's points, the flag marshal points, because it was probably the safest place to be, where I could get nice and close to the track, and I didn't have to worry about any marshals going there, because there was there was virtually nobody there.
Well, that's the reason why they had lights installed at Queensland Raceway a few years back.
Yeah, they've got the lights have gone in now.
Around.
I noticed they've put lights in at the island now as well. There were lights have just gone in or going, because they are doing a lot of work at the island. Winton's had it for a long time there, so it's the only way you can do it. But then somebody's got to. You've probably got to. You
still need someone to go out there and pick up debris.
Or,
and as Jeremy
put
saying,
the cars
what about
out
the
if they're
poor
on
ladies who aren't
fire.
allowed to drive?
Yeah.
Yes, the ladies who aren't allowed to drive anywhere in Qatar. So,
Well, no, they don't have to. They have self-driving cars.
of
Or
course.
if you're actually, did anyone see the little orchestra that played the national anthem before the race?
I didn't know that.
Do you think all those people were imported workers?
Oh, right. Okay,
They don't have to drive their cars home. They pay somebody to drive them for them.
Of course.
This is what happens when you're an oil-rich nation.
Yeah, well, that's very true. All the pit to car radio, all the cameras, audios go back to the UK, get packaged there and sent back.
Yep.
That's very much the case. That's very much the case for all that. A lot of the stuff that even post COVID, a lot of the stuff like Radio Le Mans. Most of the time, sometimes John Hindhoff is at the track, but most of the time, if he's not at his home in Hindhoff Towers, he's actually at the NASCAR. He's in Florida. I think it's in Florida. Might be at Atlanta, but there's the NASCAR Broadcast Centre. So he's there. Basically, it's Shay Adam is the only person on the ground because she's in pit lane. Everybody else, Jeremy Shaw and John Hindhoff, for a lot of the IMSA events, and certainly for a lot of the international events, are doing it from, often from their homes. So, and they do it seamlessly. You really wouldn't know. I mean, in most cases, John's in England and Jeremy's over on, I think, the west coast of the United States, and Shay's at whatever the track is, and you'd have no idea. You would swear that they were all just they were all sitting around the studio.
Yeah,
together.
if you've got a decent low latency connection, you can do it anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and that's it. Well, we know. I mean, we've done it ourselves. I mean, like with the stuff
At
we've
a
done
much
from
lower budget level.
at a much lower budget level, and with jerry rigged material and all that. And we'll probably try and do the same thing for the Baskerville Historics, because as I said to Stuart, I've got a new toy to play with that I'm hoping will work, and we're going to try to do something from. Going to try to do something from Baskerville, but once again, that will involve, say, either the Pete or Stuart or someone at this end, sort of, piecing it all together to try and make it look a lot more professional. That's what we did for Sandown Historic when we did the pit walk. Stuart was at his. Stuart was at home. I think you ran it through VMix,
I was
didn't you?
literally on the other side of that wall.
Yeah, so and you ran it through. We were putting the.
We were using Video Ninja on a couple of
Ninja.
phones into VMix, and then from there to StreamYard and StreamYard to YouTube.
To the world, yep. And then basically
Smooth.
using.
Oh yeah.
Jeremy pointing out that Qatar would love Renee Gracie zooming around in her only hands car. Unfortunately, Renee is not competing this weekend too. She was. Yeah, she was. I'm not sure why, but yeah, apparently she's not competing in the GT4 series in that very nice little Janetta. That's a nice little car. That, and she had problems with that at Sandown. Didn't do many laps. And they had, I think it was gearbox problems. But apparently she's not racing this weekend at
Well, that wasn't
at the Bend.
a full series arrangement with the GT4. Like her concentration was on the GT3 on the Audi, not on the Janetta.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, well, I think she'd probably be better off. She'd be better off concentrating on the GT4. But she was very popular. I know she had our mate Ricky Capo was doing some driver training with Renee and met a few people from the team. Liam Hill and a few people in the team who were working with her, and everybody had nothing but good things to say about her. She was very good with the fans. She was very good with the fans, apparently. Not the only fans, but lots of people going up, lots of kids going up, lots of girls and young girls saying, "Oh, yeah, I want to be a racing driver." Speaking of which, coming up next week on In Pit Lane, it's our preview show for the Australian MotoGP, and have a look. We've got. If we can get permission, we've got a bike in the studio, and we've also got one of the young competitors of the from the Oceania Cup that is raced there, a young 15-year-old Melbourne girl who's racing at Phillip Island. She raced there last year. So this is her second time at the island, and she's going to be our guest on. She's going to be one of our guests on Thursday night on In Pit Lane, as well as a very, very loud and very, very very heavy death metal band. So,
well, gentlemen.
Okay, so I think that's us done for the day. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to everybody for watching. As we say, tomorrow night, 9:00 on Channel 31 in Pit Lane. We had if you did watch the behind the scenes, you'd have seen lots of stuff happening behind the scenes. Not a lot of it was actually functioning because we had all sorts of technical problems last night. But as I said on the crew page today, you'd never know when you have a look at the finished product, and it didn't take much. But it was we had a few issues unfortunately with the band, with audio issues. We had some audio issues which you will notice tomorrow night for the first segment. But yeah, so our guests were. Couple of guys from the Western District Car Club, and they've got their autocross happening down at Avalon this weekend down at the Geelong Motorsport Complex near the airport. They're interesting their take. If you have a look tomorrow night, interesting their take on the proposed complex at Avalon as well, and just how it's going to affect them. And it's a bit worrying. It's got sort of overtones of what happened with the Pakenham Auto Club with the whole Cardinia Motorsport complex. It's like, hey, we're building you a brand new soft serve ice cream machine, hooray! And then of course their track, the one that they're racing at the weekend, is being rezoned, and as a result, they've got nowhere to race until, of course, but no, you'll have access to the brand new super duper FIA level 2. Then they went, we don't need an FIA level. We need a dirt track and a bit of and a big car park for a motor car, and that's pretty much all we need. And no,
you don't.
No, you need a 20,000 seat grandstand,
you'll have what we give you and be grateful for it.
Grateful.
Yes, exactly, Mark.
That's something I didn't know either.
Yes.
Oh,
Alpha 10-hour relay on this weekend.
The 10-hour relay.
Thank you, Paul.
Happening this week at Winton. I wish they would publicise these things a bit more, because that would have been a good one to go up for actually and do some coverage of. As I keep saying to car clubs all the time, I said to the Western District, I'll say it to anybody: we have equipment, we have the gear, we can cover these things. All you've got to do is talk to us and basically just make it worth our while. We're not charging you a premium. We just need to cover our costs. So yeah, so if you're having any events coming up, and that's what's happening down at Baskerville, like Jason and I will be down at Baskerville. We're not getting paid for it. They're just basically they're flying us down there, and they're giving us a car, and they're giving us a couple of nights accommodation, and that's we're more than happy to go out, and really looking forward to that. So that'll actually be our show for Melbourne Cup week, because it's the weekend before Melbourne Cup. And so that'll go will be the second Thursday in November. There'll be a half-hour special from the Baskerville Historics.
Oh, brilliant!
And it sounds like it's going to be it's going to be a really good really good meeting by the sound of it, as it was last year. Hopefully the weather will be better because they're running it later in the year, so it should be a really nice, really good weekend. And then, of course, the weekend afterwards, the Sandown Historics.
Oh.
And I think the same weekend, there's also a big Supercar meeting down at Phillip Island on the same thing. And we've got the Sportsman Nationals, the drag racing up at Heathcote Park. So once again, got to figure out what we sort of cover, because we can't be at all three. I'd like to do the drags, to be honest with you. But unfortunately they're a bit hard to deal with, so it might be either Sandown or Phillip Island, which are obviously a lot closer as well.
And another 2 weeks after weekends is the state round at Calder.
Yeah, Calder. It's interesting. They haven't got like full fields, and they haven't got all of the categories run because they added it at the last minute. And we had Joe Fawcett, the new Victorian Formula Ford champion, on the show last week, and he wasn't sure that whether he'd actually wrapped up the title or not. But apparently the Formula Ford guys basically looked at it out there and went, no, we're not running. It's they deemed it as too rough, which is interesting because the Hyper Racers raced out there, and yes, it was rough, but they were quite happy to race there, and they're a lot more stiffly sprung and just a little bit faster than the Formula Fords. So there's the Bend Classic coming up. No cars have been announced. It's scheduled for the weekend after next. Yeah, there's so much stuff on. But yes, as we said, the weekend after MotoGP, Australian Superbike round again, and of course the World Supercross happening at Marvel Stadium. Unfortunately, we were invited to the launch. Unfortunately, it was Tuesday morning, which is the worst possible time because we're getting the show ready together, so we couldn't go out there because they were doing stuff out there, and we couldn't make it. But hopefully we'll get an opportunity to do some stuff out there. They are one of the better group of people. Their PR organisation for both the Australian Supercross series, which we had in Adelaide, and for the WSX, which was also got Tony Cochran's involvement. Really, 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 really good. Okay, let's see you. We'll see you all next week, everybody, on Full Course Yellow. Until then, thanks for joining us, and
good night.
Say goodbye.